Crypto products and NFTs are unregulated and can be highly risky. There may be no regulatory recourse for any loss from such transactions.
Hello and welcome to CryptoTV presented by CoinSwitch Kuber. From cartoon apes to video clips, sales of NFTs touched around $25 billion in 2021 as per data from market tracker DAppRadar. The speculative crypto asset exploded in popularity. Why is so much money being spent on items that do not physically exist and which anyone can view online for free? This is baffling for many. For many artists, though, NFTs represent an opportunity to showcase their art and to monetize it. Are NFTs a bold new space for art and artists or a passing fad, a bubble? We'll discuss this with my guest today, Terence-Hari Fernandes. He is the founder and creative director at Lekh-Haq. He's been a journalist, a video editor, writer, and director, and has made short films and music videos. Terence, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
Terence, can you tell us a bit about Lekh-Haq?
Sure. Lekh-Haq is it's a culture impact company. We try and help people understand that the arts would be nothing without a deep understanding of why it should exist and we help people engage with it more and better.
We wish you all the best in whatever you undertake through Lekh-Haq. Let's get into our topic for today. But before we do that, I want to explain briefly what NFTs are. NFTs are crypto assets that record the ownership of a digital file, such as an image, video, or text. Anyone can create or mint an NFT, and ownership of the token does not usually confer ownership of the underlying item. Unlike crypto with currency use cases, NFTs are one of a kind. They're non-fungible, which means that they're not interchangeable with each other. It makes each and every NFT very unique. But every day, there are reports of scams and counterfeits. Terence, take us briefly through your NFT journey.
Sure. Like a lot of people, I discovered Bitcoin way back while the Occupy Wall Street movement was happening. And it was deeply fascinating because it represented a breakaway from the very, at that time, obviously broken financial system that we had propped our global markets on. At the time, obviously, I was coming out of college, and it took me a while to sort of establish myself as a professional. It was only recently in about 2021 when, through my company, Lekh-Haq, I was able to mint the world's first Indian short film as an NFT, essentially trying to pave the way for new imaginations of this new technology. So since then, we've been trying to ally and work with some wonderful people, and we're trying to build some use cases for NFTs being used for social good, which you will see soon, hopefully.
Okay. What are the big problems from the artist side that NFTs are attempting to solve?
So far, since for a very long time, essentially, we've seen artists and audiences and fans essentially locked in a battle for advertiser attention. That's been predominantly their currency. It's the attention economy. The like, share, and subscribe model benefits pretty much absolutely nobody. So far, artists have been at the mercy of labels, studios, and auction houses with very little access. And when access has been democratized, or at least seemingly democratized, there's been absolutely no money to really speak of. Across the board, we've had individual people coming up and only being able to make money, to make these things work for them. In that case, artists as well as audience members have had no way to truly thrive and grow and contribute to an ecosystem of art. NFTs help them take back that power, take back that control. And that's it. In two ways, essentially, in two words rather, ownership and value. Today, an artist, take a music artist, a visual artist, a filmmaker, have no way of truly monetizing or staking claim to their own work sometimes in the public sphere based on issues with intellectual property rights, based on issues of distribution. And in order to reach an audience, they have to go through people who will eventually take a cut. Now, that sounds like a fine world if you listen to the capitalists, to the corporations, but when you really think about it, you have people who choose and who pick and choose, very few people who are not representative of the larger spectrum of artists. They leave out, very famously, leave out a large looming section of the artist community who have no other way to find an audience. And this hurts audiences too, because they have now no ways to find artists who represent themselves, their identities, their beliefs, their ideologies, their aesthetics even. So in that way, NFTs help bypass the middleman, the middle person, if you will. NFTs allow artists to claim authenticity, prove authenticity of their work, and sell it in an open marketplace to audiences who can now benefit from the artist's own contribution, as opposed to hype generated through corporate interest and advertiser solicitation.
It's really complicated for an artist to kind of, from middle India to get into.
It is complicated right now, absolutely, I agree. It's as complicated as having an artist, having a visual artist listed at an auction house. It's pretty much as complicated to get a film greenlit by a studio. It's pretty much as complicated as having a label represent your work. Those things have not become less complicated. We've just found new ways to get the work on those platforms and then dissolved into invisibility, right? There are thousands, if not tens of thousands of films on Netflix, which all suffer from the middle Netflix algorithm issue, which basically, yes, you can have your film on a platform and an OTT, but nobody's going to watch it. You can have your songs, your albums, your podcast on Spotify, Apple Music. Nobody's listening to them. Democratization has essentially led to invisibilization, which again is a problem. And the problem is more so that there's no way out now. You're sucked into a whirlpool of a platform where now you have no way to be discovered apart from pumping more and more money in, and which honestly, even if you ask the platforms, they're going to tell you that that's a bad idea, if they're being honest with you.
But yes, it is. Yeah, but isn't that the same problem then with the blockchain?
It absolutely is. But there are very key differences.
What is being solved? Okay, go on.
There are very key differences. I do enjoy the question because it does seem like the world is changing, but it's also staying the same. The key differences here are that for now, if I had a song on Spotify, if I had a film on Netflix, just listed there, available for viewership, if I were to put money into promoting that right now, I'm making money for Netflix. I'm making money for Spotify. Today, if I had an NFT of the same, and if I put money, or if I were able to raise finance to promote that work, I would be making money not just for myself as an artist, but also for other people who've bought that NFT. And that is an essential key difference where ownership becomes so important. When you own the product, you are invested along with your investors, which is the audience, your fans, in its life cycle, in its growth. I am now rewarded when that grows, when it reaches more people, when it gains more appreciation. And not just rewarded in the very intangible like, share, and subscribe model that we currently exist in, which absolutely benefits nobody. No real human being, rather. It benefits no human being. Now we are all benefited through the asset rising in value, which is impossible to ignore as an artist.
So crypto is very, very volatile. And that translates to NFT. When crypto goes up, NFTs share the fate when crypto topples. And with the situation that we now find ourselves in, it's tough going. So, it is it's an asset which is attached in a way to speculation. Does that benefit artists?
It benefits artists because speculation is a very interesting thing when you actually start thinking about it. Speculation if you take even the traditional finance markets right now, they're also based obviously on speculation. The market goes up and down. Otherwise, you won't have any mutual funds making ads about, how I'm uncertain and invest uncertainty. However, it's important to understand, one, this is a very young market right now. There's a lot of volatility because it's growing in very, very, very many different ways. At the same time, you have a large influx of capital because people are seeing it as an investment in the future or a quick cash grab. But at the same time, it's impossible to have the same amount of people building things of value, simply because it is a very, very young market right now. NFTs have been around since about 2016, I want to say. In the public imagination, however, since late 2020, 2021. We're talking about an entire industry or market that less than a year old in the public imagination. It's important to give it time to understand that this is absolutely a bubble, which is expanding and contracting as we speak, but its underlying value is impossible to ignore, which again is ownership and value for both artists as well as fans together.
So a bubble with value.
A bubble that is worth betting on, especially if you're going to bet on a use case which is valuable. No one is saying that everyone should make $1 million. The value of $1 as well is going to eventually, we will see where that will end up in the value of fiat currency, but that also has not been without its volatility. It's been years and many governments that have taken into account how to achieve stability. And we've seen multiple times over, these markets crash. And when they crash, people get hurt very, very badly. So I don't see reason to denounce overall the value that NFTs and the blockchain underlying it brings to artists, especially because we're seeing some short-term growing pains, as it were. The market will stabilize, as all markets obviously eventually stabilize, as long as the underlying product has value, has utility.
I'm going to shift our conversation to the consumer angle. As a consumer, when I buy an NFT, what do I exactly get? What are the costs I incur? Is there hardware, software that I need? Are there extra fees or tax that I have to pay?
That's a very good question. When an individual or consumer buys an NFT, it's obviously important to understand what we're talking about, because as you've said before, and as is understood, an NFT is basically an asset. It's like saying I'm buying a thing. You need to know what you're buying. Are you buying a house? Are you buying a car? Are you buying food and vegetables? An NFT can obviously represent a thing. Let's say it in the context of this conversation, if it represents a piece of music, a song, it could represent a piece of visual art, it could represent a film, it could represent merchandise of the same, it could represent an access pass to a certain event or a certain club. So it's important, obviously, to do your own research and understand what the NFT represents in the first place. That being said, assuming you would have done that, it's extremely simple to engage with this. It's no different from interacting with the digital wallet you already have in your phone. A Paytm or a Google Pay is almost as seamless. You would require, obviously, therefore, a crypto wallet, which works as an extension to your browser. There are a lot of options available today which offer you a variety of activities and utilities in order to make your life easier. There are obviously hardware wallets as well, which have added security, but it's important, again, to do research into what your speed is in the ecosystem. With regard to fees, that's very interesting feature of interacting with the blockchain and using cryptocurrencies, because an NFT may cost a certain amount of cryptocurrency, but over and above that, when you want to actually buy, when you want to interact with the blockchain to make that purchase, you will have to spend what are called a maintenance fee, or what is called a gas fee. Gas now is a variable. It's a fluctuating number. It's higher when there are a lot of people interacting with the blockchain, and it's lower when there are few people interacting with the blockchain. To me, there are obviously a lot of people talking a lot about gas fees. To me, it's a very exciting mechanism to limit incredible volume of expenditure, which honestly no market really needs, or civilization does not need massive consumerism. It's a very interesting way to limit our ability to buy and really think through our purchases. So you would obviously have to incur a gas fee, be it high or low, and based on that, it's a seamless, almost two-click procedure once you read everything involved.
Do you think it's practical for a common art lover to engage with NFTs?
That's something which I think is a very beautiful concept, because on the one hand, right now, if you had an art lover and they wanted to, let's say, engage with an artist, or say visual artist or a painter, I'm not 100% sure anyone really understands how an auction works at Christie's or Sotheby's. I don't think it sounds wonderful to hear piece of art sold for $1 million, $10 million. It's a wonderful thing to hear, but the actual intricacies of an auction are still beyond an average art lover. However, that being said, in the world of NFTs, it gets extremely simple, because art can exist in so many ways. You no longer have to understand these very complicated legacy models of buying and selling, which are based on sometimes being there in person, being a part of a very exclusive club of individuals, having a certain amount of money. Right now, with NFTs, it's a marketplace, obviously, which we're very comfortable with online. And it's practical for an average art lover insofar as you aren't always buying things which cost over $1 million. You can buy small things, small items on NFTs, which have very interesting use cases and things that it can allow you to do. You can obviously buy very, very expensive pieces of art as well. So in terms of practicality, it has a lot to offer to a large spectrum of art lovers, the people who can and want to afford the very large, big pieces, as well as the ones who can afford, want to engage with smaller projects as well.
Just make this one thing clear is that, when I go outside the universe of the blockchain, when I go and purchase a piece of art or a piece of music, say, I buy a painting, I actually get that physical painting. But with an NFT, I only get a link to the painting. I'm right about that, right?
Yes.
So that link, the rights, the ownership then stays, of course, with the artist.
There are many ways to slice this pie. Not always. So when you buy a painting, it's important to also mention what you also get along with the painting, which is a proof of ownership, proof of authenticity. You wouldn't buy a Mona Lisa without that. So yes, while you get a link, it's also important, obviously, to remember that a lot of paintings in the modern world are not always done on canvases. Sometimes they only exist as a link when they're made through computers, especially generative art, which is only possible through the mechanism of an algorithm, which is a very exciting place for art to be as well, especially in the world of computers and the 21st century. So yes, when you get an NFT, when you buy an NFT, let's say of art in this case, you get proof of authenticity as well as the painting to view.
So each NFT sold is one of a kind. The contents, though, can still be shared, copied, and sold to anyone further down the line by the artist. What happens then to the value of the NFT that I paid a lot of money for?
So when we talk about copies, it's important to understand, obviously, that an artist who sold a painting as one of a kind wouldn't sell the same thing again. But that would just be bad business. We don't need to explore the world of cryptocurrency to understand that if Da Vinci ever painted another Mona Lisa, it would obviously not be the same Mona Lisa. It would be a different one. But of course, he couldn't sell the same one again. We obviously understand through this and a lot of things happening in the world today that there is a large perception that anyone can just copy paste that same NFT's art and resell it. That obviously is theft. That wouldn't be taken into a use case. But let's take another use case, which I'm sure you're also very familiar with. What happens when the NFT is just copied, right? So someone just copies it and posts it on their own account or anything like that. In that case, what becomes very interesting, as well as in the first case, the same thing applies. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of prints and T-shirts with the picture of the Mona Lisa on them. We don't see the Louvre throwing out the painting with the frame at that time, because again, proof of ownership is a very important thing for an average art lover to understand. The fact that you own something doesn't mean that only your eyes can see it. Copies of a thing are just that. They are copies of a thing, and art should be, and as is understood by a lot of the people of the community, art should be viewable and enjoyable by all. But the ownership is what the blockchain authenticates, and that's a very important thing which I think people don't talk enough about, because that's the gap of understanding here, is that when we engage with an art market today, which obviously a lot of us don't engage in the art market today because we don't have a lot of money just lying around waiting to be invested in art. But when you can now, it's important to understand the difference between ownership and someone viewing something.
Yeah, I think the challenge is really ownership, because it's like buying the deed of a house, but you're not buying the house itself. And you pay the same amount of money that you did for the deed as you would pay for the house. Because we lack a legal framework, perhaps there's very little people can do.
I think that's also
problematic, right?
It is problematic if it's phrased like that, and that is how it's currently understood. So I will give you that. But when you buy a house, you are essentially buying a deed to a house, because if you buy a house and you go to that house and someone else is living there, you can say, I have a deed. How do you enforce that deed? It's a piece of paper. One could argue it's a piece of paper. You go to the law. There are more than I'm comfortable with use cases of land capture. We don't discuss that very often. There's more than, for far too many cases of people having papers, people having fraudulent papers, and the same legal system that's meant to enforce them can sadly be gamified, right, through spurious activities, which is obviously a very bad byproduct, and not a lot of people get justice. However, what's interesting with the blockchain is that it's a permissionless peer-to-peer system, where if a deed of that house exists on the blockchain and another one was made after the fact, it's impossible to refute which one came first, and it's also impossible to refute who owns the original in this case. That creates a legal framework, or a framework of enforcement rather than using the word legal, which is impossible to argue against on some level. It's impossible to not prove who owns something, simply because, again, the blockchain exists. Right now, we have registries and registrars that are owned by people. Even if they're digitized, they're very easy to manipulate, given the fact that we see them being manipulated almost on a daily basis. So when you buy a work of art, or a house in this case, we must be very clear, you are buying the papers that prove you own the house. The house itself is immaterial, especially when you renovate it, because then you didn't buy that house in the first place. And it gets very complicated.
Let me illustrate this further. Okay, the platform which sold an NFT of Jack Dorsey's first tweet for $2.9 million halted most transactions because people were selling tokens of content that did not belong to them.
Mm-hmm.
Its founder said, this is a fundamental problem. So there are two problems. So one, he's saying people are selling unauthorized copies of other NFTs. And the second problem is that people are making NFTs of content that does not belong to them. So people are simply minting counterfeit digital assets and conning other people.
Absolutely.
Con jobs will keep art lovers, investors away, and artists will suffer. How do you see this situation being handled?
I'm very glad this was a question, because this was a very recent happening. A lot of platforms have also been dealing with the same thing, not just Cent. OpenSea has obviously come out and said a lot of things. DeviantArt had recently tried to solve this problem, which actually revealed the scale of the problem itself when they put out a tool which, if an artist on DeviantArt was trying to mint an NFT, they would check, does an NFT already exist of this kind? a lot of people then understood the scale of this problem. And what you're talking about right now is absolutely it is a fundamental problem. And it is so prevalent right now in almost 80% of the art world, in NFTs. The solution, I think this will keep investors out. Will it keep art lovers out? I think it's largely possible, obviously, in the short run. But I think also there's a very good silver lining in there that we will slow down and actually think about what we're doing here. The fact that counterfeit art can exist is an immutable byproduct of a permissionless system. It isn't a good thing, obviously, and I don't think anyone here is trying to say that this isn't a problem that we need to fix. However, it's important to also understand that down the line, we need new ways to authenticate this. We need to find new tools that help us understand the provenance of a certain work of art. Today, this problem largely exists because, and I would invite you to think about this, this problem largely exists because so much of the art that people have made for so long exists on insecure Web 2 platforms. Why isn't Instagram or DeviantArt or any of these platforms securing my artwork? Why is it so easy to steal? The artwork which has been made in the past is being stolen on these Web 2 insecure platforms and being put up for sale. Is that a problem of the blockchain, or is it a problem of where I started before?
Right. So then blockchain is not solving that problem, right?
It is. But
so I asked you right at the beginning that, what is the problem that NFTs on blockchain are aiming to solve? The problems that you are listing are problems that exist on Web2.
Yes.
So we're getting onto Web3, compounding the same problem. And it's not creating a problem just for art lovers or investors, but it's creating a problem for artists themselves.
It is. But again, like I said, it's been 2 years that we've begun to understand this new technology. We're going to see a transitionary phase, as you will with any technology, which is coming in. The underlying promise of it, again, I reiterate, stands true. It is possible to prove, without doubt, the owner of something. But right now, as we migrate our mindset and our assets, as well as our ethics, we're going to see it growing in ways which we don't like. And there will be fixes, again, like I'm saying, once the market equalizes, once people understand, do a little more research. If someone has stolen a work of art, the original owner, the original artist can always come up and say, which is what's happening right now, right? We see a lot of people coming out and saying, I am the original owner of this. Here's the proof. And it's, again, what's wildly exciting about this, it's up to the people to understand, do their own research and make sense of the market.
There is another criticism of NFTs is that they're widely environmentally irresponsible because each transaction or recording of an artwork takes more and more computing power, and that means more and more resources are consumed. How do artists reconcile with?
This is a very big problem, which I'd also want. I'm very excited by this question, especially in 2022, as of recording this, simply because I still hear this question a lot. And this question we had dealt with at Lekh-Haq back in mid 21 after we released our NFT in April around, because this is when it started to be understood that there was a great impact on the environment and the climate. However, it's important to understand why there is an impact on the environment, because certain blockchains, Ethereum, for example, exist on a proof of work consensus model. Without getting obviously into the specifics of that is what is environmentally unfriendly. Since then, and this stands testament to the climate consciousness of the community and the variety of blockchains, there are new consensus models which have been coming out, which a lot of blockchains, including Ethereum, which has now almost completed its move to Ethereum 2.0, are taking into account and are moving to more environmentally sustainable consensus models, which is, for example, proof of stake. Polygon, interestingly enough, an Indian blockchain network, which is built on top of Ethereum, has always been a proof of stake model. So this problem, for all intents and purposes, has been solved. And a lot of people who are now recently getting into it, into the blockchain and NFTs are routinely finding articles published, generally speaking, in the first half of 21. And I'm glad. Obviously, it's a deeply important thing to think about, because again, we're talking about a community of people who want to look away from large systems of manufacturing, oil, large hegemonic corporate structures which take no recourse, which have no interest in, seemingly have no interest in any redressal to the climate conversation. But the blockchain space has routinely had people who are trying to do better, and they have. Ethereum 2.0
I
will
think to
be.
say that large corporations have had, don't have conversations and have climate consciousness is a policy again, because ESG is a very important part of any corporate management system now, and every large corporation, every small corporation also has to now comply with these particular rules. So there is a lot that is being done. Yes, we could always do more as a people of the world, but it's not like there isn't any.
Sure, I'm sure.
So there is backlash against NFTs, which is coming from within the artist community as well. A lot of artists themselves are saying that they do not want to be part of NFTs because it is not democratizing any access to wealth. All that it is doing is creating more individual winners and not changing the rules of the game as they exist right now. And we've spoken about it in Web 2.0 as well. And the same thing kind of carries forward. So would you say that the NFT system as it exists right now is broken?
I would. Of course I would. Again, it's very, very, very new. About 80% of this, and I think a lot of people would agree with me. I don't know how much they'd like me saying it out loud, but about 80%, 85% of the space is not very worth engaging with. But it's the 20% that you fight for, as in any industry. As in any new technology, the 20% is extremely valuable. A lot of artists that I talk to, a lot of, not just artists, a lot of platforms as well, which I speak with, be it film companies or museums, even those have a lot to gain from this right now, are anxious. I don't think they. I think a lot of their views right now, lashing out, is stems from fear and anxiety, uncertainty, which is fine, which is fair again, because I mean it isn't going to hurt any of us or all of us in the long run, simply because we're only going to be able to do this together. It's important to have conversations like this, for example, to allay fears and concerns and combat them, because you can, in this case, with information, with knowledge, with education. And it's really only when we educate each other that we'll understand truly how this can happen. Because right now, if you ask me, has it democratized the world? Has it democratized finance? Has it democratized access? Of course not. It hasn't. It would be very, very premature to say that that's already happened. But the optimism, the hope is well-founded in the technology, not in the benefactorness of a few, not in the fact someone's going to be nice to you, or corporations are eventually going to understand that they don't need to make all the money and just leave a little bit for the people whom they benefit of. It's going to happen though, but it's going to happen together. So, yes.
Terence-Hari Fernandes, thank you very much for your insights and for your time today.
Thank you.
Crypto products and NFTs are unregulated and can be highly risky. There may be no regulatory recourse for any loss from such transactions.